but says she has a person who can fix it right away. She then goes to the other room, forcing Beck and Barbara to abort the mission and quickly hide the belt. MBS Angle takes the keys, uncuffed Barbara, and takes her to the other room to fix Grace's dress. However, the arrogant woman is stunned to see Barbara again, but she lets her work for the sake of her wedding. Once it's done, Barbara is returned to her position, and MBS Angle hangs the keys on a rack further away from their reach. Soon after she leaves, Barbara tells Beck to throw his belt at the rack. It's a much difficult task, but after some attempts, he manages to get it done. Barbara also does her blood art thing several times, and Beck finally manages to retrieve the keys. He immediately frees himself. But when it's Barbara's turn, he refuses to give her the keys and instead throws them away. The poor woman just watches as Beck grabs the briefcase and crawls out of the station. Fury takes over and Barbara rips out the wires in the wall. She uses it to try and locate the keys, but to no avail. With no options left, Barbara and Joshua engage in some chit-chat where they talk about their lives. But amidst this, she notices an electric socket, which gives her an idea. She first strips the wire, then uses her blow dart and threads to form a pulley. Up next, she carefully connects the wire to the socket, but this is when Hudson shows up at the station and enters through the wedding hall. He shoots Miss Angel in the leg and then barges into the other room, forcing Barbara to drop the wire. Hudson sees his loser son in the corner, but decides to go after Barbara first. He begins taunting her like it's something personal. During this time, MBS Angle crawls to the room and Barbara discreetly signals at her to plug in the wire. The old woman uses all of her strength to do so. And as soon as the current hits the wire, Barbara grabs the other end and sticks it into Hudson, causing him to knock out. But he inadvertently shoots Barbara 3 times in the gut. This leaves her on the verge of death once again. While handcuffed, the scene shifts and we are taken to the accident site once again. But here, Barbara doesn't want any trouble, so she neither stops for the briefcase nor calls the cops. She simply speeds away from there until she reaches home. But when she notices the sign going out of business outside her store, a fire burns inside her and she realizes she needs the cash. She then rushes back towards the site only to find Hudson shooting Beck dead, panicked. Barbara immediately turns her car around and flees the scene, while Hudson loads his son in the car after driving for a while. Barbara exits the car and goes inside a restaurant with her sewing kit. But Hudson, who had been tailing her, also arrives with his son and sits next to her. He immediately whips out his gun and places it on his lap to intimidate her. The waitress soon arrives and Hudson orders lunch for them, saying they're a family. She notices that Joshua is injured, but Hudson insists that he's fine and sends her away. Once alone, Hudson threatens Barbara, urging her to forget whatever she saw earlier. He wants her to pretend like they're a family and nothing else. Hudson also says he can't take Joshua to the hospital, so he orders her to stitch him up in the restroom. Terrified, Barbara agrees and takes Joshua to the restroom. Meanwhile, Oscar arrives at the restaurant with his quilt as he spotted Barbara's car. Hudson claims she's not here, but Oscar doesn't believe it and sits next to him. He then starts yapping nonstop about his talking quilt. Inside, Barbara begins stitching up the injured guy, during which they have an emotional conversation. She then gives him a roll of thread, telling him to hold on to it no matter what. Meanwhile, Oscar notices blood trails leading to the restroom, which makes him realize something's wrong. He immediately rushes to the door, only to find Barbara with the injured strange man. Barbara stated that her cousin got into an accident, so she was cleaning up his wounds. Hearing this, Oscar feels like he barged in at the wrong time, so he awkwardly says goodbye and leaves now that they're alone again. Hudson goes in on his son and asks why he ran. Joshua claims he got scared when the bikers started shooting at him, but Hudson knows that's a lie. He reveals that he checked Joshua's gun and found a nearly empty magazine. This means that he shot at the buyer first and was trying to run away with the money. Meanwhile, Barbara has already begun working on her plan as Hudson is engaged in conversation. She's slowly using Joshua's thread to create a network of loops that ties Hudson's table, his shoe, and even his gun. Back at Hudson, he hands his knife to Joshua and tells him to kill Barbara if he wants to be forgiven. The boy expectedly refuses, but Hudson keeps on insisting at this intense moment.
Barbara
Suddenly gets up from her chair, opens her sewing kit, which activates a song and starts dancing like a maniac. Hudson is amused by her performance, but in reality, it's all a trick, as Barbara is using her steps to weave the thread roll in the surroundings. After a while, Hudson eventually stops. The music and Barbara returns to her seat again. She then makes some more loops around Hudson's shoe and pants, and tosses the roll to Joshua underneath the table. But then, a furious and bloodied Grace shows up at the restaurant looking for Barbara. Hudson claims it's not a good time, but the angry woman shuts him up and forcibly takes Barbara outside. The latter hesitantly gets to work with a button, while Hudson watches her from the window. After the work is done, Grace drives away, and Barbara is left all alone outside. Here she signals to Joshua to start the act, after which he pulls both rolls of thread. And this immediately yanks away Hudson's gun and starts dancing around the chairs and tables. In the end, the gun is pointed directly at Hudson. Joshua pulls the trigger several times, killing him on the spot now that she's no longer in danger. Barbara immediately grabs the briefcase from Hudson's car and flees the scene. When Joshua notices this, he becomes worried. So he crawls out of the restaurant and gets inside his dad's car. Elsewhere, Barbara has reached home with a briefcase, and she cracks it open with a tool. When she notices the stacks of cash, she begins storing them in her drawer with tears in her eyes. But unfortunately, she accidentally detonates. The bomb in the house is engulfed in flames. Joshua also arrives at the scene, but he can only watch as a badly injured Barbara crawls out of the house. Even in this timeline, she's about to die. Following this, the scene shifts back to when Barbara was at Grace's house to fix her dress. She accidentally drops the button, but chooses to pick it up this time. Barbara then shows it on the dress and finishes Grace's chapter for good because she doesn't have to hurry now. She takes her usual route, which is opposite to where the accident took place. Unfortunately, after driving for a while, she stopped by an armed man who turns out to be none other than Hudson. He demands to know the directions to a certain place, and she hesitantly points it. Hudson then, surprisingly, throws in a few stacks of money inside her car and asks her to forget about this encounter before driving away from there. Barbara is overjoyed by the sudden turn of events. Finally, her choice paid off. Okay guys, thanks for watching. See you again in the next video.